Hey everyone, it's John here, and in this Fireside Chat webinar, we drill down deep into the second step of our six-step process for starting and growing a recruiting agency. And the second step is your messaging. Essentially, once you have identified your niche, you found some prospective clients to reach out to, hiring managers, then the next common question people ask is, well, what do I send them? What message do I send to a director or VP level hiring manager to even hope to get their attention, have them stop what they're doing, read my message and reply back, right? Especially when we all know that every hiring manager at any attractive or growing company gets bombarded by recruiting vendors all the time, weekly, sometimes even daily, trying to break into that client's account and win them over for new business. So your message needs to be dialed in to the point where you have a chance to stand out from the crowd. Otherwise, if what you're sending is similar to what other recruiting agencies are sending to these hiring managers, there's a good chance that your message could get lost in the noise. So anyways, in this fireside chat, we go deep into different messaging strategies, why it's important, and ways to kind of pro-market candidates to really stand out from the sea of other recruiters. All right, hope you enjoy. Cool. Hey, Tanya. Good to see you, Jack. Hey, Kevin. Good to hear from you again. Tanya's raising her hand. Um, okay, actually, I'm glad, and we definitely want to make this interactive. So, yeah, feel free to type in any questions in the Q&A button, and then we'll ask Josh will be kind of helping moderate that. So, all right, let's actually kick things off here. So, let me move this really quick. All right, guys, welcome to this week's Fireside Chat. Very excited to be with you. Here joined by Jesse and Joshua again. And the series of Fireside Chats, we're doing a talk on each specific step of our six-step process. And today we're going into step number 2, which is your messaging. Right, last week was step 1, which is your niche. If you guys missed that, feel free to go back and check that out. We'll have recordings posted. But today is all about messaging and how to specifically message a potential client to get them to respond and have a chance at getting a new client. Because really, that's where it starts, right? It doesn't really matter, unfortunately, how much recruiting experience you have, how deep of a network you have, how much industry experience you've accumulated over the years, if you don't have a client who is asking you to recruit for them, right? If you don't have a client, that's where it starts. We're going to jump deep into messaging today. And so I'll kind of give kind of the high level overview of what we'll cover. I'll give a couple of my thoughts and ask Jesse and Joshua to chime in as well and share their opinions and experience. But in terms of messaging, I think one thing I always think about is like, why is this so important, right? And messaging, if you think about it, it's your opportunity to make a good first impression, right? Because like, let's face it, recruiting and the recruiting business is a double-edged sword. There's upside and there's some downside, like with anything else. The upside in recruiting is all the things that attract people to run their recruiting business. Like anyone can do it, don't need a degree or certification, right? A low bar to entry and super high profit margins, right? One hire on average being 20% of a candidate's first year base salary. So oftentimes it's 20, 25, 30 or more, $30,000 or more every single time just for one hire. So that's the con, right? Or the pro. The con is that because it's a low bar to entry, it's super competitive, like with any attractive business. So what that means is with lots of people, crowded playing field, then your message to your hiring manager is your chance to make a good first impression, to really stand out from the crowd. And that's not always easy. It's interesting. We hear from people all the time. They'll say, hey, John, I've started my recruiting business a few months ago. I've reached out to almost 100 people now, and nobody is getting back to me. I'm not getting any response. I got a couple no's, a couple of we're not hiring, but no positive response. Like they're like, I'm racking my head against the wall here. What am I doing wrong? And then when I say, well, show me your message, I read it. I'm like, that's why, right? Your message it's well written, it's professional, it's clear. Unfortunately, it also sounds like what every other recruiter is sending. And if you're if you can imagine, like in this market, any hiring manager at any attractive growing company gets bombarded by recruiters on a weekly, even like daily basis. So that's really the first thing to solve for after your niche is how the heck do you get a hiring manager to stop what they're doing, take a moment out of their busy day, read your message, and actually reply back to you? That's the first like thing to that's the first step of the that's the first battle to win, right? Of course, the reason why this is step two is because your niche feeds into the messaging, right? So you can be hyper specific in your messaging, being clear on what you specialize in. But yeah, thoughts on that, guys, on kind of why making a good first impression is important and why it can be difficult with a crowded playing field.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the last part that you brought up was really important is knowing your niche first before you go into messaging, because it's tough to have like a really specific and targeted message without first knowing like the type of value that you're targeting or what you're bringing to the table. So yeah, I completely agree on that point. And once you've like really done that discovery and understand your niche, I think it also makes the messaging a lot easier. It doesn't take away from the difficulty that it is to make a good first impression, but being someone that can stand out of the crowd and really like position yourself as not like another one of the numbers that they see just pop up on their inbox is super, super important. And it's really like what defines the beginnings of the business and like the scale and growth of it long term.
Yeah, 100%. And unfortunately, like trying to crack the code and figure this out on your own is doable. It's just very expensive, meaning that if you think about, you have one chance to make a good first impression. Let's say you go out there and it kind of like with all the positive intention, you're trying to go out and drum up some business, reach out to a bunch of companies and hiring managers. If you're kind of just winging it, taking your best guess, and it ends up you're sending kind of a message that's not as optimal as you would have normally liked, and they reply back saying no thanks, it's very hard to come back and re-engage with them, as you can probably imagine, because imagine if I reach out to somebody like Joshua on as a hiring manager on LinkedIn. He says no thanks, I'll let you know. And I reach back out 3 months later, like, hey, it's John again. And then he'll be like, oh, I already said no to this guy. So the answer is still going to be no, right? There's no reason to. So it's hard to reopen that door once it closes. And the part that kind of scares me at times when I like go out to market and reach out to potential clients is I never know which company might end up being my best client, right? Like I never know which company might bring me on as a recruiter. I fill one position and they're good, they're all set for the rest of the year. Or if they're a client at the moment I make a placement, they're like, John, thank you so much. Your candidate's amazing. Hey, look, we're gonna open up the rest of our job orders for you. Right? We have 12 more people we need in different departments. Can you help us out? Right? Because um, and kind of with the 80/20 rule, right? Most of the successful, like I think our most successful alumni who have multiple clients, they say that 80% of their billings come from like 20% of their clients. So that 80/20 rule completely applies to recruiting. And so if you think about it, any of these clients can give you one placement per month, right? $250,000 a year. And you never, so I treat every opportunity, every company that I reach out to as if this might be worth $250,000 every single year. And so, of course, then, we start adding up all the no's that could have been maybes, it could have been yeses. You start seeing, oh my gosh, this opportunity cost is like huge, it's in the right, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's why I always try to encourage people to take some time, be really specific on their niche, be really clear, and then also be really clear on the messaging, have it dialed in so that when they go to market, they have a fighting chance to get some type of conversation started. Right.
And
Joshua,
something,
thoughts on that?
yeah, so something about that, like having your niche dialed so you know exactly who you're helping and how you can help them makes the messaging that much easier. But the other thing it does, and something most recruiters do, we've even had some in our program who come in with that mindset is I just need to contact 1,000 people a day. And eventually somebody is going to say yes. But like you mentioned, there's only so many hiring managers out there. If you contact 1,000 a day, you'll burn through them all in 2 3 months and they're all no's because you just kind of took the spray and pray approach
Mhm.
rather than slowing everything down, being very specific, very targeted, because we recommend people message 30 people a day. And a lot of times some of our most successful clients are only sending 7 to 10 maybe 15 messages a day, but it's because they know exactly what their niche is, who they can help, how they can help them, and that's the only people they need to reach out to so they can slow everything down and really make it as effective as possible, increasing the chances that, yeah, by sending lower volume, they end up getting more yeses because the foundations were laid and they didn't kind of take that somebody will say yes approach. It was more, I'm going to treat this as a $250,000 a year contract and I'm going to
Mhm.
go find my next one. So it's just a different mindset overall, I think.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
it's counterintuitive, but it works so much better.
Yeah, agreed. Now, I guess I think once you kind of understand, so now that you understand why having the right message is critical to even breaking the ice and hoping to start a conversation, then the next question people ask is like, well, okay, well, what do I say exactly in my messaging to get their attention to the hiring manager? I get a response. So generally speaking, there's like kind of two schools of thoughts with a messaging approach. You can have like a candidate focused message or more of a services focused message, right? So the candidate message is one that we tend to promote, and that's really reaching out saying, hey, I have either an amazing candidate, or I have a couple candidates, or I have a network of candidates that I think could be a good fit for your specific team, the roles that you're hiring for, and then using kind of basically dangling that carrot, right, in front of the potential client. Or another example I give a lot is like if when you're at Costco and you see all the people handing out samples, and if you take one, and most of the time you're like, no thanks, or like I'll try it, but that's kind of mediocre. But every now and then you're like, oh, this is amazing. Like, let me take a whole box of that, right? That's the idea. So you're like the Costco vendor offering samples out, and the samples have to be kind of relevant and appetizing to the right audience, right? So that's the candidate approach. And then at that point, so that's nice because when you focus on the candidate, you're taking attention away from yourself, right? So they're not going to ask you so much like when I take samples from Costco, I'm like, wait, how long have you guys been in business? Tell me the backstory about your food company. I'm just more like, this is tastes good. If so, I want more, right? And so similarly, when you promote a candidate focused messaging, it's like, hey, here's my candidate. If they look good, the hiring manager is probably going to ask for more. That's the idea. The other side of the coin is more of a services offering. So it's not about you offering a sample, it's you talk about yourself, right? Which is, they use the Costco example, the food vendor saying, hey, let me tell you about our rich history of growing grapes and why, or growing olives and why we have the best olive oil. And they go into the story about how their family's from Sicily and they've been doing this for 10 generations and this. And that works too if you have that type of story to weave. And so what that sounds like from a recruiting company, it's like, hey, we've been recruiting for 20 years, only in, like, I know a recruiter that only does work in dairy, like the dairy industry, like milk and cheese product. That's all they do. They've been doing it for 10 plus years. And so, of course, like that's very attractive to a specific type of client, not so attractive for the rest. But unfortunately, I think most people who are getting into this don't have the track record to say we've been doing this for 10 years. So they really, I think, leaning towards the candidate approach tends to be the quickest point from A to Z to get that initial response. Does that kind of make sense? Or what do you guys, anything you want to add to candidate versus services offering approach?
So I think that approach is like a complete flip of what most recruiters do. They just send out a message, hey, I'm a recruiter, sign my contract, and I'll go find you a candidate. It's like
Right.
me, all about me. Um, and like what you mentioned, the candidate approach takes that spotlight off of you, which makes a lot of people more comfortable because they're afraid of selling, being pushy, anything like that. But whenever you've got that great candidate and you lead like, hey, I see you're hiring for a dairy farmer or a cow milker, just using the analogy, with 5 years of experience. I've got this cow milker here. He just came from Purdue Farms and he's looking for a new opportunity. If you're interested in learning more about him, let me know and I'll send his resume over. That's all about them and what they want. And there's nothing about you, your experience, your
Mhm.
lack of experience, anything like that. You're just saying, hey, I understand you have this problem. Here's something I think can help solve it. If it does, let me know. So while most people are just, hey, look at me, pay attention to me, sign my contract now, book a call now, it's a way to like, yeah, stand out and get noticed because it's different than what everybody else is doing, where they're just me.
Yeah.
The right messaging is here's what you want, here's a small sample. If you want to talk more, I'm open to it. So That was my thought. What do you think, Jesse?
Yeah, I have a lot of experience with focusing more so on like the value that you can add from building a bridge between the talent to the pain point or hiring need for the client that we're talking about. One thing I was going to say is that I think it is important like to understand like your voice and like the backing that you have, but I think that's more so in conversation where when you're doing this initial outreach, like it doesn't matter like what your background or anything, like talent is talent at the end of the day. So if you have a really talented like milk farmer and you know that the client that you're reaching out to needs exactly that, then it makes it that much easier and more like palatable for the client to look at this and be like, yeah, this is a talented individual. This is someone I want to take a look at. Me personally, like in my firm, I can like talk about an example for you guys is that when COVID came, and there was a lot of layoffs going on. I had a pretty robust network of people within like the telecom industry. It's like Verizon and AT&T. I saw that T-Mobile like went and was rebuilding their whole sales team. So I took my network and the best ones from their competitors, and I reached out to all these hiring managers at T-Mobile and focused more so on the candidates that I had and like how awesome they were, how much of like an ad they would be to their company, and that opened a lot of doors for me, and it took a lot of the pressure off of myself, feeling like I had to sell the company or I had to do something like as an individual. And more so, I just focused on like the solution and the talent that was in place. Because at the end of the day, we're working with people and they want their pain to be taken away. They want to be able to have a solution. So coming in like with that candidate first approach has really paid off for me. And it's something that I think is like a really it separates yourself from like all of the messages they get on a day-to-day basis of people talking about themselves. Instead, you're putting up on a silver platter for them, like, here's the value, like here's the talent right here for you. All I need to do is just have a conversation and then take away that pain and help you out.
Yep. Yeah, I love what you said there. It's funny, a lot of people, come to us and they're kind of worried. They're like, oh, I've been thinking about starting my own recruiting business, but why the heck would a company choose to work with little old me, a one-person solopreneur boutique search firm, when they could work with the multi-million dollar corporations like the Randsteds, the Robert Halfs, the Aerotechs, all these big name companies have vast resources. Why would they work with me? And I think this kind of addresses that concern, because at the end of the day, if you lead with the fact, like if you are a tech recruiter, for example, and you're reaching out to a company saying, hey, I have this senior software engineer who has subject matter expertise in cloud technologies. They come from Google. They hold a computer science degree from Stanford, and they actually work in cybersecurity, same as you. In fact, they're very familiar with your team. They work for a competitor. Let me know if you'd like more information. Like, if you're leading with that level of that quality of sample, do you really think that the hiring manager be like, hey, before we talk, tell me how long have you been doing this? No, they're gonna be like, wow, if this is your sample, like then now I kind of get the idea of the quality of people that you work with. Like, we're good. I'm not gonna need to grill you about how long you're working, like how long you've been doing this in this industry. Like the fact that you have the sample in your possession means that you know what you're doing, all right? And you can find
Mhm.
similar people as well as find people who are easier. Because if you lead with that and they say, oh, we don't need that level of engineer, but we do need like a more junior level software administrator or something, right? Or a computer programmer, they know that you can do that because you led with something much higher, right? So it's more of the top-down approach as well. So now that people get the approaches, right? Obviously, we promote a more of a candidate-focused approach. Now the next thing is really how do you deliver this message, right? I think we'll get more into this kind of the next fireside chat when we talk about, I think, automations, right? But or in upcoming fireside chat. But really, kind of briefly on that is like, okay, we can take the message and send it by hand, but that's not going to make a dent in kind of the available uh, companies right now seeking talent versus kind of doing it at scale with automation. So something to keep in mind as well. But in the beginning, if you're doing it by hand, I think a very common way to do it that people do is they'll go on job boards, right? Go on LinkedIn jobs, see how many jobs are posted, and they just solely reach out to that. And that's their only strategy. That's their main thing to do day in, day out. The problem with that is if that's all you're doing, you're fishing in a very crowded pond, because every recruiter is then jumping on every new job posting because they know the company's hiring, and they're like, and they say the same thing. Hi, hi, hiring manager, first name. I saw that you're hiring for this role. Well, we specialize in finding these roles. Can we book a call? I can tell you how to solve your hiring needs. Again, and so if you're approaching this from like you have a message that doesn't quite stand out from the crowd, and then you approach companies that everyone else is approaching, good luck. And then you will kind of adjust, and you will need a superhuman amount of volume to like get some traction, right? It can be really tough if that's all that you're doing, which is why we always recommend having like a multi-channel approach. Sure, go after job boards, but then also canvas the people who are not actively posting, because let's face it, not every position that a company needs to fill is being advertised on LinkedIn. That's just one platform, right? They might have roles on their website. They even have roles that are not even listed anywhere else. There's just positions that are coming down the pipe in a couple of weeks. But when you reach out to them, it can be an opportunity hire. Oh, we actually are looking to bring on someone like that next month. But if I don't mind getting the conversation started now, right? So so kind of like if you take a whole pie, a whole circle, and you kind of divide it by slices, just by targeting actively hiring companies that are posting on LinkedIn, that might be like 25% of the pie. Then you're missing on 75% of companies that are posting in other places. Indeed, maybe a ZipRecruiter. Companies are just posting on their careers page, or companies that have no posts, but they're always looking to bring on rockstar engineers or salespeople or whatever. And if you don't reach out to them, you'll miss out on the chance of getting an opportunity hire kind of conversation started, right? Where they say, you know what, we don't need them that right now, but we're always keeping our eye open. And when we come across a rock star candidate, we'll make a home for them. We'll figure it out, right? We'll create space for them. So in general, it helps to kind of cast a wide net. That way you leave every stone unturned. But thoughts on that, guys, in terms of where to find companies that are looking and kind of how to go about reaching out to them?
Yeah, one thing I was going to say, like at the end there, that I've had some success with is when you were talking about reaching out to potential clients, regardless if they're hiring now or not, and leading with the candidate first approach. Is there's been many a times where just because I have such a rock star like Dev, like coming from a technical background, that leads into a conversation, and that individual ends up interviewing for a position that's not even available, because
Mhm.
you're providing so much value and you're building that bridge even though they don't even know they need it yet. So yeah, don't stray away from that. That's one thing I wanted to key in on, is because there's a lot of relationships that I've been able to nurture and like bring about just from like providing so much value up front and not assuming that they don't need my help just because they're not hiring right now. So that was just something I
Yep.
wanted to call out on.
Yep. Sweet, man. By the way, we got a couple questions. Let me take a moment to maybe we can address these. So Tanya, who I spoke with before, she said, "Hey, are we building a pool of candidates first?" And that's a great question, Tanya. We get asked this a lot, which is, well, what if I don't have a sample to offer to the market? What if I don't have a candidate already to market? What should I do that first? And like with everything else, there's many different approaches where you can do this, right? Which is why like I always find it a little bit challenging to give advice on these type of webinars, because I hate giving like cookie cutter advice that may or may not apply to your situation, because recruiting can be really, really different depending on which industry you're going after, what size companies you're targeting, if you're doing direct hire salaried recruiting, or if you're trying to place staffing and do more hourly contractors or consultants, plus your background. So when you take all that into consideration, like different advice has different mileage for you, which is why like if you guys are listening to this and you're interested, of course, I'm always happy to speak with you. You can reach out. I'll drop my calendar link below later on, or you can reach out to us through our website and request to book a call. And so we can kind of then give you more customized advice. So just kind of keep that with a grain of salt, as we're giving you kind of a broad advice that will apply to most people.
Mm.
But in general, Tanya, when you're thinking about candidates, I think when you message about candidates, there's different ways to, I think there's really two options, right? Do you have a candidate or do you not? If you don't have a candidate, which is normal when most people are starting off, they don't have like a rock star candidate in their back pocket, that's okay. You can then say something like, instead of saying, hi, hiring manager, I have a great candidate for you, that would be, obviously don't say that. That would not be honest or integrity. So definitely don't do that. But instead, we can say is I've identified a couple of candidate profiles that I think closely fit the requirements that you're looking for, right? By saying you've identified some profiles, that just means you went on LinkedIn, just quick search, found that there are a few people on LinkedIn that fit the roles perfectly, and that you've identified them, which is true, right? Now, of course, you're not saying that you're engaging with that candidate and you're representing one right now, but that's in full honesty. So then when you book a call, you can then show them the profiles that you found, or better yet, let's say today, for example, today is Tuesday as we're recording this. If you book a call with a potential client on Friday, then that gives you 3 days to go hustle and find a real candidate to bring to the table as a sample, right? So it's totally okay to say that you have some profiles. So that's like worst case, just say you have some profiles you've identified that closely fit the requirements, right? Second best thing is to say that you have a network or pool of candidates in this space and that you have a few samples to offer them, right? I think the very best, and I think the most way that you can stand out is by saying you have one sample that's like an all-star. Like, this is a 10 out of 10 candidate, rock star, someone that like, most companies in your field would be, like salivating to like interview because they're that good. And then you can build a whole messaging strategy or campaign or automation just around the one individual. So that's kind of having nobody, which is LinkedIn profiles, having a few people, which is good, and having one really attractive candidate, works really well too. Would you have add anything to that, or what did I miss kind of from there?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like it.
the only thing I was going to add, oh, go ahead, Josh, you got it first.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I like it. That's the general approach we tell people to take because it's a balance between prospecting and sourcing. And as you do it more often, I mean, within the first couple weeks of prospecting, you can be sourcing as well and start building that candidate pool, and then just shift to through the three different messages that John mentioned. So yeah, it doesn't take a real long time to make that adjustment.
Yeah, the thing I was going to say is, so when it comes to having candidates available that just are like already in your pipeline, that comes naturally, like as you work through your niche. So eventually, like you will have, for instance, if you're in IT and you do software development, you'll have A-level software developers in your network that you can proactively pitch. Like John said, if you don't already have them available, then the last thing you want to do is lie to them and say that you're representing someone. But speaking about your network that you have in place, and then hustling that like 48 or 72 hour, whatever it may be, after you have that call to get the solution put in place is what I refer to it as. I've done that many a times, and it always works out because the initial message is just like providing to them like the value that you have in place that you have access to that you can help them out with. Then on the call, you're understanding more about the position and talking through the profiles that you've came up with and like understanding at a higher level, like what exactly is their pain points, what do they really need, and then from there, you're going to give yourself like 1 or 2 days, 3 days, and you can just go and get those individuals, put them in place. I've done this many a times, and then you have interviews at the end of the week. It's the way it goes. It's there's multiple steps in the process in order to get yourself to a hire, and this is one of the routes you can take, and it works like a charm, truthfully.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. So let's do this, guys. We're kind of half hour in, and maybe we can kind of keep half hour as like the lesson, the kind of the training piece of it, and then we can use the rest of the time for Q&A and kind of last minute thoughts. So we're getting some good questions here. I'll kind of read some out, and maybe we can tackle these together. So anonymous attendee asks, basically, what about CRMs, right? What effective CRMs could we use to start out on our own with recruiting? So that actually brings up a good point. So I'm glad you asked that. With the CRM, I mean, there's lots of different tools out there. In the 1.0 version of our program, I had literally a customized Excel spreadsheet that I used to run my business for a number of years. Obviously, now that we're in the 5.0 fifth version of our program, it's iterated where we actually use some nice tools. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter that much. And the CRM, the approach is tricky because let's say you have a great CRM tool that can track and log all your prospects. The problem is if you're doing it manually, like reaching out to clients manually, it's not going to help you too much. It's not going to really affect things. And this is something we'll get more into when we talk about the automation section of our fireside chat. But kind of real briefly, let's imagine you're manually saying, all right, every day I want to carve out 3 hours and reach out to 30 companies and 3 people at each company. So maybe a director level person, a VP level hiring manager, and maybe the highest level person in HR. Fine. So now 30, that's probably more like 20 companies, 3 people each company, that's 60 individual contacts. So with a CRM, you're reaching out, researching them, finding them, maybe putting their LinkedIn profile, doing some research, writing something really personalized. Cool, hit send. Now you log that into CRM, set out a initial call, create a follow-up task for say 3 days out to follow up again. Okay, 3 or 4 hours later, you reach out to all 20 companies. Well, great job, but what happens the next day? So 20 new companies, right? 60 messages plus, let's say you have another 60 from the day before to follow up on. By day 8, you're like swamped. You're like, oh, shoot, those first batch of people, I'm never gonna get back to them. So having an organized CRM doesn't help solve for the problem that you're going to be the bottleneck in terms of how many hours per day you can reach out to follow up with people. And of course, as you're probably aware, the money's in the follow-up, right? It's very unlikely that if you reach out to the right hiring manager, that you just happen to catch him on the best state of mind, the best day of the week, where hiring is like top of mind. They could be putting out many different fires in the department. And so the first time you reach out to them might not be the time when they're ready to have a conversation. It might be the 5th reach out. They're like, oh, hey, Jesse, thanks for bitch. I've been meaning to get back to you. We actually had a developer who left unexpectedly. And so we have to backfill the position ASAP. Let's talk, right? And so how do you plan on getting that 5th message out to them if you're manually tracking everything manually on the CRM, right? It's impossible. So we'll get more of that to that when we talk about automation. But to answer your question, it doesn't really matter what CRM tool. If you're doing it manually, you're gonna be facing a hard challenge and an uphill battle. That being said, that's exactly why we try to make it simple for people. Like back in the old day, I think last year we used to, before that we would say, hey, in terms of tools, here's a list of like 10 different tools to go ahead and buy and subscribe to a la carte. So buy a LinkedIn automation tool, an email marketing software, a CRM, a applicant tracking system software, a calendar tool, a website hoster, and then software to kind of tie it all together. And we'll show you how to duct tape it together. Now, while that worked, it still works very well. It takes time. It takes a couple of weeks to get that all integrated. People who are not as technically savvy might take them a month or longer, and it's kind of expensive. So we actually offer a CRM tool that includes everything else, the automations, the applicant tracking, the website hosting. So we have it all in one platform. Joshua actually did many, many months of great work to help build that. So thank you, Joshua. And so it's called RecruitingSoft. And it's out of the box. We have all of our configurations, all the campaigns, all the messaging sequences pre-baked in that you can take, you can customize a little bit, tweak it, and then hit launch. And within 48 hours, you can actually be out there prospecting using our best methods that we've proven throughout the last 4 years of coaching, putting 300 people plus through a program at this point, and it's cheaper than doing it yourself. So you don't have to use our stuff in the program. We can definitely give you a list of like to do it yourself, but most people just find that having us already doing the hard work up front just makes it easier for them. So we like our tool, but you don't have to use it. Any tool that gets the job done, we're fairly tool agnostic. And then lastly, Jack has a question. When you send a sample, how do you block out personal information? And is it possible to work with a company that has internal recruiters? Okay, yeah, Jesse, I know you're going to have some things to probably share about this, but let me take a quick stab at it. So when you block out personal information, easy, you can just get any type of PDF editor and just replace the name, Jesse Tuggle, and replace them. I like to rename the resume like confidential candidate #1 for Joshua. Let's say Joshua's a hiring manager, right? Or engineer candidate #1 for Joshua if he's looking for engineers. And then, so that scrubs the name, obviously take out the contact information. And I'd like to even scrub out the name of their current company, right? So I'll say confidential instead of HubSpot or something, because then they can easily go to that company and find someone that. So you want to make it, you want to have that balance of, and it's tricky, right? So we have best practices for this, Jack, but in general, you want to kind of have a balance between making it anonymous enough so they can find the person on their own, but leave enough context and details that really highlights their qualifications. So that's how you would do that. And lastly, is it possible to work with a company that already has internal recruiters? So short answer is yes. And that's one of the common things that come up, right? As you can imagine, it's a common response that you'll get from a potential client when you reach out to them. Hey, we already have an internal recruiter, but thank you. Or they might say, we don't work with agency recruiters, right? Or they might say, I'm not the right hiring manager, or what are your fees? This can get really daunting and probably a little nervous for a lot of non-recruiters, even people with sales experience, but just not having formal recruiting background on how to address this. Because we talked earlier on this call about why it's so important that you make a good first impression with your messaging. Well, same thing when they reply back. Now you've succeeded with like battle number one. Just how do I get a response? But now the response is a question like, "Hey, thanks, but," or it's an objection. We have an internal recruiting team already. Now you have one chance to reply to that to then get them to book a call with you. So your response is, I'd say, just as important as your initial message. And so, it's funny enough, we actually mapped out uh, and mapped this out. And there's only 8 possible responses someone can say to you when you reach out to them. There's only 8 things like, what are your fees? We don't work with recruiters. We have internal recruiting team. I'm not the right hiring manager. We're not hiring right now, all that stuff. And so rather than I remember back in the day like having to like take my best guess. I was like, send, like I hope that worked. We don't want people to go through that because again, it's expensive to burn through these opportunities if you don't have everything dialed in. So instead we have a response framework. If they say this, you copy and paste that. They say this, you copy and paste that. So Jack, if someone were to say to me, hey John, thanks for reaching out, but we have a team of internal recruiters. Here's kind of off the top of my head the response template for that specific response or objection. It's I first of all get on their side. Hey, Jack, I appreciate you sharing that with me. And actually, most of my clients have internal recruiting resources already as well, right? So step number one, I get on their side of the table where I'm aligned with them. Step number two is I I position myself not as a replacement for their current solution, right? But as a supplement to it. So I never want to say, for example, I know Jack, you would never say this, but like, hey, you know what? I'm way better than your internal recruiters. Like, I can do a better job than them. Heck, if those roles are still open, that's because your internal recruiting team is not doing their job, right? Like, put me into action. I'll solve this for you. That's going to create conflict. Instead, I say something along the lines of, so Jack, look, that's great that you have internal recruiters. Most of my clients do. In fact, what how we help clients is that we're not looking to replace what you're already doing well. Instead, we're really positioned to help provide additional candidate flow when you need it to, right? So that way, ultimately, you have more options to choose from, and you can ultimately decide which candidate is the best fit for your team. Let me know if you like more information on that, right? So that way they're, oh, okay, you're not the bad guy, you're not the replacement, you're not trying to, rock the boat, right? So that's how we'll address it via message. Now let's say again on the call and it comes up again. Well, John, like we're really interested, but we do have a team of internal recruiters. We pay them a lot of money. So gosh, I'm not really sure if I can cost justify bringing on a recruiter, paying them a 20% fee. And that's when I would do the exact same thing. But here, because I'm on the call, I can have a little more time and space to work with that. So for example, I might say, let's say Joshua's the hiring manager. Hey, Joshua, I totally understand, right? This needs to really make sense for you. And I get it. I am not the cheapest solution. In fact, I'm probably the most expensive talent solution out there compared to you, posting a job on LinkedIn or asking for referrals. But, Joshua, you mentioned this role is open for 5 months now, and then you've exhausted your search. Everyone who's applying online, you mentioned, is like just not the right caliber, not the right quality. You're wasting a lot of time and cycles interviewing people who aren't qualified. And now it sounds like you really need to fill this role now. It's been open for too long. So, with that being said, can I share with you how our clients tend to utilize our resource, right? How they use me? I'll say, sure. So, oftentimes companies who have internal recruiters already, which is great, they'll utilize us in the future or kind of as needed in probably one of three very specific situations. One might be a situation where, kind of like what you talked about, right? The role's been open for a very long time. They've exhausted their search. They've tapped all their network, and now the role being open is causing too much pain. It's causing too much problems with the department that now they decide, let's just find some professional help and get this thing solved. And so that's where I can come in, where really I fill the hard to fill roles. Because let's face it, it was easy to fill, you would have filled it already. And what that means that usually when I come in, that's because other search firms have been inadequate with finding you the right talent, and then that's where I come in, right? Another situation is a situation where it's very time sensitive. So sure, a role could be fairly straightforward to fill, but if someone left unexpectedly without giving 2-week notice, and all of a sudden their immediate and unexpected departures create tons of problems and extra work for everyone, a lot of clients tell us that's a very, very painful situation. And that's where we come in, where we can work very quickly. And because our niche is this is all that we do, and our network is built just on this, we found that we've been able to quickly plug in the right people very, very fast, faster than most clients can do on their own, and they could get back to business as usual, right? Or the last situation, not that common, but sometimes there's always somebody in that position that needs to be filled, meaning there's already someone in there, but for whatever reason, their quality of work, it's not working out, and the powers that be have decided to replace that person. Now, of course, like they want to do it quietly, discreetly, and not to raise alarm, so they can't post that they're looking for a new VP of sales when that person can be like, "Hey, that's me," right? So that's usually when they'll tap us on the shoulder and say, "Hey, can you quietly, discreetly start to build a pipeline of a candidates that we can interview offline and then start to make that replacement seamless and easy and not really rock the boat." So that's kind of where we can come in as well. Anyways, not sure if any of those things might come up for you down the line, or if it makes sense for you to keep in your back pocket in case one of those things might arise. Right now, of course, I'm giving you guys lots and lots of sound bites and talk tracks for different scenarios. In real life, you would just pick a couple of those, but I'm giving you a kind of a wide breadth of things to choose from because you can pick and choose what is relevant for the conversation. Again, hard to give cookie cutter advice to the masses, but yeah, that's how I would handle. Do you have, that's my long answer to, oh, we have an internal recruiter as well. Different ways to attack that, different angles you can approach it from. But yeah, Jesse, I know you have good stuff about this too.
Yeah, no, that was awesome, man. The only thing really that I could add is just from like my personal experience. Like I've ended up working a lot with corporate recruiting like managers or corporate recruiters. Like once and I'm speaking down the line, like once you're working with them and everything, is that you'd be surprised, like as long as you have a good relationship, like the in-house recruiters that these companies have will love working with you because you get to take off like all the stress on their plate. Like John saying, like the hard to fill role or something pops up and it's gonna interrupt their whole workflow of all the positions they're working on. You're there to supplement things and just be like that extra assistance to help them out. So I've had like really, really good relationships with internal teams at companies I've been working with before. So don't get scared away by that. The way that John laid it out, I'm not gonna be redundant with it because you did a really good job. But I just wanted to like reassure you all from my own personal experience. I've always had really good relationships and it works out well. The other thing I was going to say is with redacting resumes. It's a fine-tuned thing. I find myself like sometimes I'll take off certain information and I'll change it and spin it a different way. Like I'll take away their name and make it like the job title or like confidential number one, or maybe I'll just put their first name and the last initial. I kind of do like a variety of different things. But there's a ton of tools online. It's super easy. I would recommend redacting resumes before you send them. But it's a fine-tuned game of like providing some information, but not all of it. So you keep them interested and they want to maintain a relationship and be able to work together on a solution. But yeah, that was awesome stuff.
Yeah, great. And last thing about dealing with a situation when the prospect already has an internal recruiter. Also, that comes with your targeting, right? A big part of messaging strategy is who am I going to message? And I talked about that earlier, right? We don't want to really go, it's like a Goldilocks thing, right? If you go for companies that are huge, like the big corporations of the world, Microsoft, let's say, uh, they're going to have tons of money. Like your fee is going to be a drop in the bucket. They don't care about your $25,000. They'll just cut that check out like it's nothing. They won't even blink twice. However, they might have an army of internal recruiters, right? When I worked at Google in Mountain View, right, I took a little Google bus from San Francisco with my little backpack. I worked there, and we had a whole floors of recruiters. And my pod was like 6 of us working just on like network engineering, right? And then we had another pod on DevOps. And so obviously, when you try to reach into one of those accounts, when they say, "Hey, John, I have an army of internal recruiters," now that's difficult, right? Now they still use agencies for the reasons that I mentioned, but it's harder. So Jack, if you are running into that a lot, where they say, "Hey, we have a team of really strong internal recruiters that are doing a great job," then what that might mean is, if you're in the program and I was coaching you, I'd say, "Hey, let's look at your targeting. You might be targeting too big of a company size. Let's kind of target closer to maybe 50 to 500 employees, where they might have one HR manager, one recruiter, but that one recruiter slammed where they're trying to fill 30 positions." Then as an agency, you're actually able to add more value, right? Or better yet, maybe go one step further, go like 20 to 100 employees. Now that team might not even have any recruiters. They have one HR generalist that's doing HR, that's doing payroll, that's also doing recruiting and posting jobs. And they know they need to hire an internal recruiter, but until then, you're kind of coming in as a band-aid. And yes, it's expensive. It's expensive band-aid, but it's necessary because until then, until they can find some longer term, maybe more cost-effective solutions, those companies lean on and they rely on recruiting agencies because they don't have the luxury of hiring a expensive 6-figure corporate recruiter, right? But so guys, I think we covered everything that I was hoping we'd cover. We talked about, to recap, kind of the why messaging is important, right? You have one chance to make a good first impression and one chance to stand out from the sea of other recruiters, all trying to bombard and vie for the attention of the hiring manager that you're looking to do business with. And with messaging, you can either take a more of a candidate approach, offering a great candidate as a sample of the quality you represent, quality of talent, or more of a services offering strategy, talking about how you can help them, how long you've been in business, how this is your niche and you've been dominating this niche for a long time. Obviously hard to do if you're starting off. And then lastly, next time in the fireside chat, we'll talk about how to take your message and plug it into an automation system to then scale out. And every single day, you're quietly reaching out to 200, 300 people through your automation and quietly tapping them on the shoulder, piquing their curiosity and starting a conversation. So that's something that we'll get into more next time. But yeah, Jesse, Joshua, any closing thoughts for our listeners here today?
Yeah, I was gonna say like the last piece, if I have anything, is that like I feel really passionate about like having a sound foundation and understanding the blueprint. And then from there, finding your voice and your style of messaging, communication, client acquisition, whatever it may be. But having like that foundation built that we're talking about is one of the most important pieces. Because from doing it myself and not going through any type of program and just kind of fumbling along and putting the band-aid on tools and technologies and whatnot, it's a lot easier like when you know where to start and what works and then putting your own spin on it as you go. So a lot of people that I coach in the program, they talk a lot about that. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that it doesn't mean that you can't change these things and you can't like let your personality and your communication style like shine through it all. But understanding like the blueprint, the foundation that we're trying to talk through and like install and all of these things to find success is what I think is really important.
Yep. Yeah, well said. And of course, for those who want more information about what we do, you can just go to our website, recruitingaccelerator.com. And actually, for people who are checking out this webinar, if you want to talk to me personally, I'll drop my personal calendar link here in the webinar chat. This is for people who have never spoken to us, are curious about how we might be able to support them. Just click on there, book a time on my calendar. I'll personally be happy to answer your questions and help at least guide you in the right direction. And Joshua, when you post this replay or in the email or anywhere else, would you mind including kind of my calendar link too? And that way people have the chance to speak with me if they want to.
Yep.
But cool. Yeah. Joshua, anything else on your end?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. That looks like all of the questions. So yeah, I think we're good to go. If there are any other questions when we send an email out, like John said, feel free, hit reply to the email or go ahead and book a call, and you'll be able to connect with him directly.
Awesome. Hey, again, hey, thanks, Jesse, Joshua, for jumping on. I appreciate all of our attendees and live webinar members. Kind of hang in there. Thank you for the good questions, right? Tanya, Jack, and anonymous attendee. And then we'll see you guys next time. So next week, we'll get into, I think, the automation. So looking forward to talking about that with you guys.
Sure. Awesome, guys. Thanks for being here.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye now.